Just setting up. Done. All right. Welcome everyone. We're so glad that you're here. Grateful for your presence. And my name is Minister Cole Terrence Randolph Williams. And I just want to say thank you for being with us on this evening. This is our Tuesday night Bible study, spiritual development and Bible study class. Today, September 6th. And I wanted to invite you to come and visit us. Visit us very soon if you can. Unity Fellowship Church of Columbia. We are located at 120 Allegheny Avenue in Towson, Maryland, USA. And so we're going to get right into our lesson on tonight. We're going to be coming from the inclusive text, the inclusive Bible. This particular text is coming from the book of Luke, chapter 14, verses 25 to 33. We're going to read through the text and just have a good old-fashioned open conversation, open discussion about it. I'll guide us a little bit with a little bit of talking points, but certainly for anyone that's joining us, feel free to include your talking points or comments in the chat, and we'll make sure that they'll get addressed tonight as well as we are here live. All right, so as we start, it says, verse 25, verse 25, large crowds followed Jesus. He turned them away and said, if any of you come to me without turning your back on your mother and your father, your loved ones, your sisters and brothers, indeed your very self, you can't be my follower. Anyone who doesn't take up the cross and follow me can't be my disciple. Verse 28 says, and 28 through 32, but we start at 28. If one of you were going to build a tower, wouldn't you first sit down and calculate the outlay to see if you could have enough money to complete the project? You do that for fear of laying the foundation and then not being able to complete the work, because anyone who saw it would jeer at you and say you started a building and couldn't finish it. What were you thinking? Or if the leaders of the country were going to declare war on another country, wouldn't they first sit down and consider whether with an army of 10,000 they could win against an enemy coming against them with 20,000? If they couldn't, they send a delegation while the enemy is still at a distance, asking for terms of peace. And 33. So count the cost. You can't be my disciple, Jesus said, if you don't say goodbye to all of your possessions. Now, before we get into discussion, I'm just going to share this with you, and we're going to talk about some terms, but I always like to ask your feedback on how you feel about it. And I want us to go through that piece, but I'm also, like I said, going to share with you some terms that I pulled out, that jumped out at me rather, as I was going through the text. So number one, the word possessions. So possessions, the state of having, owning, or controlling something. An item of property, something belonging to one. Discipleship, the condition or situation of being a disciple, a follower, or a student of some philosophy, especially a follower of Christ. There's more. Feel free to write these down if you would like. Ask me to go back to if you also need me to, no problem. Sacrifice also came up for me. Sacrifice by definition is an act of slaughtering an animal or a person, or, which really stood out for me, was surrendering a possession, you hear that word again, as an offering to God or to a divine or supernatural figure. Then this word cost came up. Cost of an object or action require the payment of a specified sum of money before it can be acquired or done. Kind of see where I'm going with these things? Next is walking. And the reason why I bring this up, because our theme for the month is walking in the fullness of God. That's our theme, walking in the fullness of God. So I thought about that when it came to this text. And so, by definition, a couple items here says to move along on foot, advance by steps, to come or go easily or readily, to go or walk, to go on foot or for exercise, excuse me, or pleasure. Another aspect of walking would be to abandon or suddenly withdraw from a commitment or situation, like a job, like I'm out of here, right? It's also a term used in baseball, right? And baseball is to allow, okay, allow or enable first base after not swinging at four balls pitched outside the striking zone. For those of you who are baseball lovers, right? You get that. And also, it says used to describe the way which someone lives or behaves, walking humbly with God. So, again, our theme, walking in the fullness of God. So, you may connect with that last one, even more so based off of our theme. Now, here's some other terms, almost kind of like a shift, if you will. So, I thought about the word gain. Gain meaning to obtain or secure something desired, favorable, or profitable. To increase the amount or rate of something, typically weight or speed, an increase in wealth or resources. And then finally, fullness, the state of being filled to capacity. All right, I think that's the last of my definitions. And I want to just go ahead and invite us to unmute ourselves. We could talk about anything that we took away just from reactions on the text. And then we'll jump into this particular, um, it's a version of the part about, um, giving up your possession. So let me do that. Let me take you back to the text and you tell me particularly your reaction about maybe verse 33. So count the cost. That's how it ends. You can't be my disciple if you don't say goodbye to all of your possessions. If any reactions to this, does anyone have any feedback on that? Or anything else that stood out for you?
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
I would say that saying goodbye to all your possessions,
Mm-hmm.
I guess for me would be not being afraid to use my possessions to help somebody else.
Okay.
Um, it might mean like, okay, for we advocate justice for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was making, $200,000 a year, but then discovered that where I was working didn't provide justice for everyone, or I knew of a situation where, somebody was being treated unjust.
Mm-hmm.
Do I just ignore it and stay there and keep my $200,000 a year?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I stand with that person and walk away from it?
Mm.
That's how I would look at it. Is it worth me being somewhere where people aren't being treated right just for the sake of a paycheck?
Gotcha.
And sometimes you have that dilemma. Sometimes you have to stand, and in standing, you have to give up something. That's
Gotcha.
how I look at it.
Thank you, Deacon Lynn. It made me think about when you said that definition that I thought of in terms of sacrifice.
Yes.
And another piece of what you were saying that made me think about the word resources came to mind, particularly in reference to possessions.
Hold on, boy. Hold on. Hold on, boy.
So, So the reason why I say that is because, like, you said if you were making $200,000, and I like how you said about your aspect in terms of justice, right? Your mindset there. Because we are indeed Unity Fellowship Church movement, I should say, the Unity movement, Fellowship movement, is a movement of social justice, right? And that's our mantra, to practice what we preach. But just going back to what you were saying, it just triggered a thought about, thinking about school teachers, right? We recognize school teachers aren't maybe the most, paid in their profession. Yet, how many times do we hear of the teachers taking from their own resources, right, to provide for the youth, for the children that they actually teach, because for reasons being like the school system itself not giving them what they need, or knowing that maybe on the home front, right, those children don't have, and so they dip into their bag, their possessions, their resources. That's something that made me think about that, and I feel like that's also a form of justice too, to look out for someone else, to give up of what you may have to help another. So thank you for bringing that to our awareness and to share that. Deacon Fletch, I saw your hand up.
Yes. Basically, sacrifice. Reverend Tucker preached on it about a week ago about sacrifice to me is that you're going to have to give up your complacentness, your comfort zone.
Right.
You're going to have to sacrifice a lot of things. And if you're trying to follow Jesus, you can't do what you used to do. You can't sit around and just keep life as it is. I can't remember the whole entire list, but there was sacrifice, there was gain. And, in order to sacrifice, we have no idea how much more we'll gain by taking up the cross and following Jesus.
That's so good, Deacon.
And what was before sacrifice?
Sure. Before sacrifice was possessions and discipleship.
Possessions and discipleship. Your possessions, they don't necessarily mean tangible possessions.
Right.
But what you have, you could give to somebody else. Discipleship it's a conditioning. That you are a disciple, you're following, you're learning, you're growing spiritually. And all of this in turns to the gain and so much more that you will get if you choose to follow Christ. But the cost is you have to, just like if we go to the store, if we buy some bread, we have to pay the cashier the money to buy the bread and then take it home. So the cost would be sacrifice, discipline, discipleship, possessions. That is the whole cost. And all of that is we have to give up something to gain. And not everybody will go with us. The friends from yesteryears, the childhood friendships, it's a personal walk. And, and sometimes when you're in that personal walk and your heart is pure, then people can't go with you, friends, family, whatever. You're going on to another level and some people cannot.
Right, there's a change that takes place.
Right.
Takes to a higher level. Right. I appreciate that. Thank you, Deacon. Anyone else have anything to share?
No, I was thinking, I don't think I had had that awareness of that being a request or requirement. But I can comfortably see that if you're changing really your whole lifestyle and following Christ, then possessions or property are really baggage that would just kind of get in the way. So it doesn't, though it is a sacrifice, it's really seems to be, on the other hand, a blessing that you don't have to figure all that out and figure out how you're going to bring all that stuff and what you just give it all up. Real simple.
Mm, okay.
So that doesn't sound like a bad thing to me. Give all that.
Justin Mark said that's a good deal. Good trade-off. Okay. Well, I didn't want to
Yeah.
leave anybody out if anyone else had anything to share. Um, Before I do, I just want to go back to something here, to go back a little bit in reference to the beginning, because when I was going through this text, for me, I wanted to look at, okay, the picture of what's going on. So, you know, I guess to put it to you this way, I picture, the large crowds following Jesus. People are following Jesus for what he could do for them, right? The works he's been doing, okay? And so I think that he wants to make it clear, right? Like I I don't think I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think it's a necessarily a negative or positive. I think initially I have a reaction to it, or maybe others have a reaction to it because, reading this, you're like, what? I gotta turn my back. You hear strong words like I think another translation says hate, right? I gotta turn my back on the people I love, people I care about. And that could be like, you know, in your face, a little jaunting. But I think the other aspect, I guess, to offer here in this conversation is about how would I look at this in terms of like how I think we were already talking about in terms of that word possessions. I think that's why it came up for me because it may not necessarily be just that in terms of the people that I love, the people that I care about, but the essence of that, right? You know, like Fletcher was saying, as you find yourself going in a higher level or just getting, drawing yourself closer to God, to the things of Christ, there is a change that happens, right? And so there's a there's a conversation that you have within yourself that I think Jesus is also maybe conveying, even though it's not like black and white said, that we can interpret that there's a conversation that you have within yourself that you need to make a decision, Like even
Right.
hear rappers, they say, places that I used to hang out, I can't go no more because they've reached a different level of success that, the homies on the corner, or you know what I mean, the folks that they grew up with that they just wouldn't comprehend, they just wouldn't
Right.
understand. So
Right.
that's what I think I wanted to pull out here in terms of like the essence of that. And so, you may find that, yeah, everything's all good as long as things are good to go, like it's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, it's like Jesus, like, hold your horses, real talk. Like you don't really know what it is that it means to follow me, right?
Right.
And at the end of the day, let me see if I can help you understand it or put it to you in a way that kind of wakes you up to think about it. Like this could be real to where you have to give up, those relationships, right? You have to give up those things that you cling to, right? That look as comfort, the comfort foods, whatever those possessions could look like.
I
And so
think
he
that language too. I don't mean to just
go
interrupt
ahead,
you, but
President. This
that
conversation.
language is just so harsh. If the way it reads without turning your back on, I mean
Right.
that's pretty cold. I mean, if you need to leave home, that's one thing, but to turn your back on
Yeah.
your mother and your parents and that just sounds so cold and that it really makes it a sacrifice.
Mhm.
And
Thank you. And that's
is
why
that
I asked what the reactions are. So I appreciate your feedback for that. But
I would
anyone?
yeah
add
is
that
Okay. Go ahead.
I would like to add that the turning your back at first on your mother and your father first shocked me a bit as well,
yeah
your loved
yeah
ones. But then I thought about it in a simpler way from folk that didn't grow up in a Christian household or in any faith base, let's say, and then they all of a sudden go to church with someone or go to a outing where there's a service or a sermon, and they then find their way to God, and they then in a way are turning from what they know. Their mother, their father, their family may not know anything and may think that it's even odd or bizarre or strange
Right.
that they would all of a sudden, be so into this, so much so that they would then want them to come to church and them to join them. And
Right.
Right,
so
right.
when you broaden it and just think about it, even in a simple form of you may have friends that have, think they may like golf and you may not, and you may decide that they have a golf tournament and that's a big thing that they used to always do every quarter, or every spring at
Uh-huh.
such and such time, but it happens to conflict now with convocation. And
Right.
you now have to turn your back on that thing that you used
Right,
to
right,
love and
right,
enjoy, and the camaraderie, at least for a moment, to
right,
go and, and
right.
and follow Jesus. So you
Mm-hmm.
know
Mm-hmm.
at
You can
first it
soften
shook
it a
me, but
bit. Yeah.
yeah, and
You can
and
soften it
make
a
it
bit.
more
Mm-hmm.
applicable to where you are, and just in changing your mindset, your walk to follow. It's not as simple as you know I'm showing up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. I hear that. I hear that.
Yeah.
Right. There's
Eh,
there's some work obviously. And again, I think that's where I think I'm hearing that in my mind, the term sacrifice that it just pulled out for me. Another part I think I wanted to before I move forward, Deacon Lynn, I see your hand up. I got you.
I was gonna say, um, Jesus was asking, "Are you gonna make a commitment to me, no
Mm.
matter what?"
Mm-hmm.
mm-hmm.
Because this isn't what he's saying is this isn't a if you feel like it moment. This is a forever moment.
Right.
You can't do it today and then don't do it tomorrow and then pick it up next week and then put it down, yada yada yada. If you're gonna come, you have to come 100%. And sometimes that does mean no, you don't. I think hate was a strong word because one of the scriptures does say hate, but if you're moving away from the norm, everybody might not like that. They might not appreciate that. But are you going to keep coming?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to keep serving me, even if your mother and your father and your sister and your brother? We're leadership and ministry. So is that cookout that you're on your way to more important than the call that you got that they need you at the hospital for
Right.
prayer?
Right.
Do
Mm-hmm.
you forsake the prayer for someone who needs it and go to the cookout, or do you go and pray for that person?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, so in essence, you're turning your back on what you had planned to do, but are you willing to do that? When the need arises, are you going to be there even if you didn't, even if that need was not planned? So I think this is more of Jesus saying, are you going to be committed 100% no matter what? And it's not always going to be easy. So count the cost.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, listen, Deacon, you got me moving on to the next. I was going to take us a little bit extra here, but please, for the sake of time, I appreciate that. In this segment here, just want to get a quick response, like a second response, if there's any. How did you guys feel about the 28 through 32? And for me, it came out that the way I thought about it was about preparation in this regard.
Mm-hmm.
So, anybody, anything that came up for you in terms of when we read this 28:32? Because Deacon
Plan it,
said count the cost. So go ahead.
count the cost,
Yeah.
plan it, know
Plan
what
it.
you're facing.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is just asking, don't come into this blindly.
Right. No
No,
half stepping. Do your
right.
homework.
Know that. So you need to pray. You need
Yes,
to
there we
have
go.
conversations with other saints. You need
Right.
to ask for the Spirit to dwell within you. You
Yes.
need to spend some time just talking to me. Just, just laying everything, lay it all out. Let me know what's going on, and I'm gonna, let you know what's going on.
Yep.
Sometimes he don't. He just send you. But because that spirit is in you, you know that it's Jesus that's sending you.
Yeah,
And
that's so good.
not just you just being you.
Right.
But if you don't establish that relationship with him, then you won't know. You will always second guess. And when Jesus is sending you to help somebody, there's no time to be second guessing. You just have to follow that lead, which means you have to know that it's him that's leading.
Okay. So, real quick, what I heard from that, and anybody else wants to add anything as well, you're welcome to do so.
Yeah.
But I heard the prayer piece. I thought about that. I mean, honestly, you guys, when I'm looking at the text, it's so much that pulls up. It's like we'll be here all day. But I thought about in terms of like prayer. I thought about like what does it look like for us, and that's why I wanted to look at that definition as far as the disciple and discipleship because your preparation, to encourage you or to motivate you would look like, that, right? It would be your constant, contact with the divine, getting your download, if you will, right? And that's that work that we have to do on a daily basis, right? That prayer, that meditation, is what that should look like in terms of how you prepare. So anybody else wanted, and that's what came up for me. Anybody else wanted to say anything when Deacon had mentioned prayer that just was like confirmation?
I would.
Yes, please. Go ahead, Fletch.
Yeah. I agree with the prayer, but also that you have to have that time with God, and you have to understand, just like with anything, it's a commitment. Understand what you are committing to, and that takes practice, prayer, studying,
Yeah.
and committing yourself to that. Because a lot of people say, yeah, I want whatever it is. And then when they find out that you have to put in the work, like, no, I don't feel like doing that. And they kind of fall off the mat.
Right.
So that's all I had to say.
That's good. Thank you for adding that. I appreciate it.
I have a question for the
Okay.
class. So Jesus was talking to the crowd and gave practical examples from their everyday lives that they could relate to. Building a house or a tower, right? Preparing for war. And you had mentioned, Minister Cole, that you see this about preparation. And I get it that, we are definitely looking for a theological interpretation that will help us understand the scripture. But I also want you to think about practical examples in your life when you have prepared to do something, right? When you have had to have the discipline of foresight, of thinking ahead about what has to be done to accomplish a particular goal. Because the word disciple really comes from discipline. And I'm certain that we all have had experiences in life, have had goals. Maybe we've, built a home. Maybe we've gone through the processes of buying a home or something else that was a practical day-to-day experience. So I'm asking, what were those experiences for you? Anyone?
For me, I'll speak on it, is that I'm building my credit. So it's, budgeting, looking at, keeping receipts, writing down what I'm spending, checking my bank accounts, monitoring my credit score, my utilization of credit cards, that's a goal, is to increase my credit score and, be in a
Mhm.
position so I can buy a house, buy a property. So that's
Mhm.
for me my practical
And so
preparation.
what are some of the things that you are doing that are considered disciplines, right? So what are you sacrificing? What are you turning away from in order to accomplish the goal that you've stated?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Okay, maybe I don't know if I'm missing it, but like for me to budget is a discipline. Like I have to only allot certain amount of money to be spent in order that I can meet my goal so that
Mhm.
I don't overspend. And then
Mhm.
I have to discipline myself to monitor my spending in terms of like sometimes just using the swipe card is like out of sight, out of mind. So then I
Mhm.
keep my receipts so I can go
Mhm.
through those receipts and actually write out where I
Mhm.
see my money is going to so I can have a understanding of that, and then I correlate to look at my overall bank statements because I have more than one bank account to
Mhm.
make sure like I see, okay, where's money being pulled from, which, like where am I using um, my money, like where's the money coming from, how am I managing my money overall.
Mhm.
So the budget is my, I guess, my process, my steps.
Good, thank you. You haven't missed anything. And
Okay.
clarifying it was answering the second question.
Okay.
Anyone else? Deacon Fletcher, your hand is up.
No, I don't know how to take it down, but I can answer the question.
I got
Uh,
you, brother.
uh, Giving up in terms of, like I said, more prayer time or study time with God, that one-on-one. You have to give up the social. If you're a social media person, you have to give that up. You have to. It's sacrificing something that you would do. Maybe watch a series on TV, or
Mm.
um, you just you would be giving up those things because you're giving those things up for the greater good. I would think so. Um, just like the discipline that one would use to clear up their credit because they're looking at the future goal would be the same thing. I'm disciplining myself to do these steps, and I'm turning away from hanging out, maybe one dinner, going out to dinner and spending $60 for two people. Those are the things that I'm turning away from to get to where I want to go.
Thank you. So then the next question, unless someone else wants to answer that question, is
I
about.
guess I just want to I guess comment that when I think of that question of discipline and the routine, it really throws me back to when I was single parent raising children and working full time on my career as well as just the job,
Mm.
um, and what that took in terms of discipline compared to today.
Right.
It's totally different, relaxed with flexibility and those kinds of things that really were not anywhere a part of maintaining, the household and making sure the kids are where they're supposed to be and functioning in school and your job and yeah, whole another whirlwind.
Mhm.
It hasn't been that long that I've totally forgotten. Yeah, a lot of discipline.
Sure, sure, sure. And I think that my pushing us there is really about getting us to see how Jesus used vivid practical examples from everyday life to help his followers understand a little bit more about discipline, about making decisions, including those to follow him in his new ministry, this new way that he was teaching. So another word that comes up a lot in this conversation tonight is sacrifice, right?
Mhm.
Sacrifice. And Minister Cole gave us a definition.
Mhm.
The etymology of sacrifice, the root of the word, sacra, and you've heard of sacra in different names like sacra core, sacra, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sacra means sacred, right? Sacra means sacred. And then the the last part of that word, the suffix of that word, facere, means to make. Sacrifice then literally means to make sacred. So we often think of sacrifice as giving up something, and sometimes giving up something that we love truly, right? That we are passionate about in order to, follow God or follow Christ, as we say. Sacrifice, however, means to make something sacred. That's your sacrifice, right? Historically, especially for people during Jesus's time, they understood sacrifice because people were sacrificing, making animals sacred as they offered them up to God, right? Or whatever it was that they were presenting as their offering, they were making it sacred for that moment. So as we think about sacrifice, then, how do we think about making that which we're sacrificing, we're giving up, we're offering up sacred? Because now, not just turning down your food so you can fast. We talked about this when we talked about Isaiah 58, right? And it's not just denying yourself of something. I'm sure we're going to get to denying yourself later in this class, right? But it's about making something sacred, making your offering to God sacred, have meaning in a way that is representative of your connections with God, as we talk about walking in the fullness of God. So with that understanding of sacrifice, right, how do you see Jesus's mentioning of sacrificing so that they could follow him?
Well, it's to make sacred then the journey, to preserve, set aside, focus only on, is a kind of a way of making something sacred. You don't treat it as an ordinary anything. It's kind of preserved and set aside or held up in some way. So that would be the journey that to follow Christ would require.
And that journey itself would be sacred? Is that what I hear?
Yeah, he's making the journey sacred. So everything else has to be, the ordinary things that he's setting aside.
Well, for me, I guess I think of, and I definitely understand about what I'm doing is sacred, or in terms of the part about the sacrifice. I just feel like my behavior and my thoughts, because what I'm doing is I ask God for the ability to do it, that in itself is like the sacredness of like my relationship, if that makes sense. Like it's because God has given me the will and the ability and even the thought to discipline, right? To sit down and do these things like Fletch was saying, to take the time out, and Trusty Marlene mentioned, to turn away from like watching TV, Netflix all day or something like that. Like I think that's the part where I feel like with my relationship or my understanding of God, that God's like, you're understanding your abilities that I've given you, like you're doing your part. Like God's like, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's I find that could be a way of considering that as sacred.
And the journey, you're saying?
Right, like
Actually,
it's yeah,
yeah,
but it's like I think of also for me sacred not being like this ritual type of thing. I think
right.
hearing that I find that one could turn to like, oh, there's a ritualistic type of mindset that you would have in terms of like what you may have learned
Caught,
from
yeah.
from before. But it's like for me it's just that it's what I'm doing. It's about, the honoring of the abilities that I've been given, the God-given talents, because I could have not been doing the right thing for myself to be, better. You know what I mean? you
Right,
know,
right. To
um,
be living a destructive life.
correct.
A more, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So that's, I
right.
think, also how I look at that in terms of that sacred makers for
Mhm.
me.
Thank you.
hmm Thank you.
So back
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah, that's rich. Okay, anybody else want to share anything on that? Because that was pretty rich.
Hmm. It's sacred.
All right, good stuff. Okay, cool. So then let's move forward. So we talked about the walking. Um, so this is so funny because this to me is like how I feel like it for me shifted in how, like Pastor said, um, reading this text, I didn't look at it in the way of like, begrudgingly I gotta give up something, you know what I mean, to follow Christ, which, it can seem that way. I don't know, like,
Hmm.
whether it's taught that way, or you know what I mean. I guess from, okay, if you think about it from the standpoint of, some people have a mindset that they're not worthy of, that they're already operating at a deficit, if you will, and so, to
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
discipline themselves to be a follower, is going to be even more like restrictive, right? Like slap on the wrist for something to that aspect. But I thought of it in a more of a, gaining aspect in terms of what you gain to follow Christ, I mean, to follow Jesus. And so then that's where these words, have popped out.
Hmm.
Um, and then the other thing I just wanted to share, what I was reading in my studies, and Pastor, please feel free to jump in. But I got this from something that I found online in terms of like the Greek phrase, because from what I understand, the writer Luke, um, Luke was a man from Antioch, Syria, and was believed to have been like a Greek physician. He lived in, like I said, the Greek city of Antioch, and so when he came to he entered into Jerusalem. This is where he becomes like a believer, from what I understood in my readings, in terms of the teachings of Jesus, from Jesus. But in this aspect, particularly of that part where it talks about, let me go back. Sorry, guys, having to jump so many slides. I just don't want to miss it. You know, count the cost. You can't be my disciple if you don't say, goodbye to all of your possessions. This part was saying, like, in the way that it's said,
That's to turn away.
it's relating to the people that, it was being spoken to, and that it's saying, to love less, to turn away from, or detach oneself from, right? And so then that's where I think I was going with, like, more so like, what would you be willing to love less, or turn away from, or, detach, yourself from for the greater good, right? To gain, to walk in the fullness of God.
Fullness.
That's where I was getting to there. So here's where our quick little, questions for the sake of time will come from, because my topic, which I should have started with, was counting the cost of walking in the fullness of God. So, I think we've already discussed it, in some ways that we've talked about what that may mean to us, but please, let's unmute, let's continue the discussion. What would it mean? What does counting the cost mean to you, right? What does that look like? Like Pastor was asking for the examples, right? As Jesus gave these very practical examples to the people, right? The audience that he was talking to. How do you connect with that, right? So, what do you feel, or do you feel also at times, this is the part about, what you're capable of doing as you say that, you're going to give something up, or you're going to focus, like I think Fletch was talking about, that practice, that prayer, that study. But do you feel that, you have some special abilities that you are endowed from doing the work, right? Do you feel that God has given you work that maybe no one else can do or will do, right? Because you've put yourself in that, in that posture, in that space that say, hey, God, I'll go. Like we hear Deacon Lynn say, is that cookout more important than the person that needs you to come, say some words at the at the hospital? So I hope I didn't lose you. Please feel free to unmute, um, chime in here, and just talk to it. We got a couple more minutes to go, so let's finish strong. What you got for me, deacons? One love, anyone?
She needed a takeaway.
Well, these are talking points, so I was just kind of guiding us to finish out the
The
class.
course.
These are questions more so, like anything that stands out, particularly like how do you count the costs? What does it mean to you? Do you feel like God is giving you
What's
work
this
that no
second?
one?
Wait a minute, I need to move this. I can't see the last question.
Okay,
Do you feel at times God has given you work that no one else can, will do? Oh yeah, sometimes.
sometimes. Okay.
And a lot of times it just has to do with how people treat people. And so sometimes I feel as I'm there to set an example,
Yeah. Right.
you know.
Yep.
People
I guess
blatantly just hurt people. And it's like that's what's supposed to happen. And I'll just do something totally different. And then, I get the side eye.
Yeah.
I
You
just
show up
laugh
as the
to
light.
myself,
Yeah. Agent of change.
because that person is a person. That person has a soul. That person deserves to be respected, even if he doesn't look, smell, or act like us. You just don't blatantly mistreat them. They haven't done anything to you. And, I'm the one that say, good morning, whatever, need my help, whatever.
Right.
And it causes people to be uncomfortable and to even, there have been times that they've said very inappropriate things, but I keep on doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And
That's
they
good.
go away. As long as they don't put their hands on me, we're good.
It's a problem.
We're real
Thank,
good.
thank
But
you, Deacon. Yeah. I'm sorry.
being an example sometimes is all it takes. But that means you're giving up something because you don't know what the outcome's going to be. But I always say, if God sends me to it, then God has prepared me for it.
That's what I'm saying. Right.
And
Okay.
sometimes that's all it takes.
All right. Thank you so much, Deacon. Trustee Marley, were you going to chime in?
Yeah, I was just I guess my hesitation or difficulty in really addressing it as that question, what
Mm-hmm.
does counting because I guess at this point, at this stage of my life, uh, it's not a cost. It's it's more of a comfort. It's it's I know generally speaking
Mm-hmm.
what that means, and
Yep.
how at different points in your life, like the discipline of raising kids or managing a household or a job or something, it really does feel like a cost, because you really don't have time for yourself to do anything but the work or the task or whatever it is, the responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand what the cost of discipline, but at this point, for me personally, the spiritual development and yeah, being where um just so happens I am when somebody needs to hear me respond to something they're feeling or thinking or going through. Um, So I think there are times when I'm happen to be the one that's there because of just God, what God knows about who I am.
Exactly. Yep. Position you to be there.
So yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so there are times, but I think like on a regular ongoing basis, just the what's expected in terms of kindness and consideration and all of those things in terms of what following Jesus means in community with people, with your life, with your family, with those I guess they can be again at different stages of your life costs, big
Okay.
sacrifices, but for me at this point it doesn't feel like a cost. It's more of a comfort, confirmation, affirmation. you
Mm-hmm.
know Try to be good and you'll be good. you
Okay.
know Protect others and you'll be protected. you
Okay.
know
Yeah. All
so
right. Thank you for sharing that. For me, I just want to share real quick something that I thought of is counting the cost is, you know, addressing a situation that I'm totally uncomfortable with. Like if I hurt someone's feelings, I was a little bit too sarcastic, and, you know, knowing that, it happened, and it's like that God thing, happens after the fact. Like it's no longer I can just be like, oh, I was just joking, right? Just deal with it.
mhm.
It's like, you know what? You saw their face. They didn't like it. You
Right.
need to at least
Ha,
say,
right. It's like
address it. You need to say, you know what I mean? So that's
yeah,
one of
look.
my things I think, and I'm grateful for it, right? So this is also going back to me saying like some things that we gain, it's gonna look different from all of us, right? But
Yeah,
little
yeah,
things in terms of like following Christ is that we gain things that, it's just a way that things that we probably didn't expect, maybe 20 years ago, 5 years ago, last month. Okay.
right,
But that's the
right,
beauty, that's
right,
the
right.
beauty of it. So I'm sorry, I'm gonna just move us as quickly as I can. And actually we're gonna skip that slide. So because this brings me to my bottom line, right? Following Jesus means being all that you can be. Okay. It shouldn't be a burden. It could be a burden, but Jesus is our helper, right? As people say, Jesus is my friend. They say call on Jesus no matter what the situation is. So I think that was my motivation too, to leave us with that in terms of following Jesus doesn't have to be a burden. Okay. And so when we talk about walking in the fullness of God, like, walk in your and bring your whole self, right? Whatever the situation is, whatever the circumstances are. Yes, it's going to take the discipline. Yes, it's going to take the practice, the prayer, the study, the meditation. And like Pastor encouraged us, was that when we now see that in terms of sacrifice, it's not something that, again, I mean, yeah, you're giving up something depending on what it is, but allow whatever you're saying, hey, God, I'm willing to do these things, and make that a sacred, part of our relationship. Make this sacred with you. So I appreciate that addition to our class tonight. So I just wanted to close us out with that. Certainly, you can give any takeaways that you do have, but also because we're at the top of the hour, I couldn't go without, I think my thing is going to be sharing a little video. So I gotta share this little video real quick. I hope you like it, and then Pastor could close us out, and you can give any takeaways if you feel you need to. All right, so hold tight. These cute little
But
girls.
they are adorable.
Here you go.
Precious.
There's a lot of things going on in the world. Here's some advice. Call Jesus. Things not working out at your job. Call Jesus. Things not working out at your school.
You didn't share
Call
the
Jesus.
sound.
Things not working out like
It's
anywhere.
the sound.
I did
It's,
share the
it's
sound. You don't hear it?
no, I can't hear it. Is
Oh
it mine?
man.
Is it something I'm supposed to do?
No, because I thought I shared it from the beginning. That blows. Bear with me, family. I'm so sorry. Forgive me for not sharing the sound. Those that those live at with me live at home. This is just a little switcheroo in the programming. This is a live broadcast, so us here at the
Yes.
station. We're just gonna make a quick little. Okay, so this share, and it says share sound. All right, let's try one more again.
Let's see.
Can you see it?
I can see it. Yep. It
Okay.
hasn't started yet.
All right, so now make sure you can. Sound is all the way up, volume's up. Tell me if you can hear it.
There's a lot of things going on in the world.
Yes.
Here's some advice. Call Jesus. Things not working out at your job. Call Jesus. Things not working out at your school. Call Jesus. Things not working out like anywhere. Call Jesus. Everybody needs a little Jesus now and then in their heart. If your boyfriend break up with you, call Jesus. Don't call Tyrone. Call Jesus. Jesus, 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 Jesus. Yes.
Okay. All right.
There's a lot of things going on.
So there we go. I just wanted,
Goodness,
I just
they're
want,
adorable.
I just wanted to end that on a high note.
He
And
said, call Jesus.
that's right. Call Jesus. Don't call
Their boyfriend
Tyrone.
break up. Now, what she know about some boyfriend breaking up with her? Oh, she just got here. Look,
You'll be surprised.
no, I'd be shocked. I know.
All
A
right,
little
family.
second
So
graders.
let us
Thank
just go ahead
you.
and close us out. For everyone, thank you for watching us. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time to unpack us and just have an open dialogue. And I'm going to turn it over to Pastor. Pastor, I will definitely keep us live if you would like us to. For any takeaways, otherwise, let me know. I can stop the share.
Thank you. Thank you. You can keep us live.
Okay.
And thank you for the class. Thank you, everyone, for your participation and for the discussion. I don't know if you know, but this slide right here raised some questions on our Facebook page. Someone, a viewer, I think, had a question and said, are you Christian? Are you Buddhist? Are you Catholic? What are you? Why are you
All of it.
of confusion, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that it also speaks to our goals toward walking in the fullness of God. As you had described, it is a process of growing and evolving. We may never, ever know all of who God is, right? But our minds and our hearts are open so that our experience with God becomes greater and richer. That also means that as we open our hearts and we open our minds, we open our understanding of who God is to us, and that our understanding of that helps us understand that others may not have the very same understanding of God, right? And yet, we honor the divine for all of the ways in which God manifests God's self to people all over this great big world, right? So I'm thankful for that. And I thank you for your discussions. I really think that we had a great discussion, and my points that I shared with you during the class came up during the class for good reason.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, I don't have a great deal more to say. I do want us, as we continue to dig in the scriptures, to really get an understanding of who the audience was for Jesus, right? And who the audience was for Luke. So here's the thing. Jesus's audience was different from Luke's audience, right? So Jesus may have shared stories with his audience for a particular reason, to make a particular point. But Luke's audience would have been a totally different audience, having been written, certainly decades and maybe even almost a century after the death of Jesus. We have the audience being a group of persons who Luke wanted to convey the power of Jesus, the power and divinity of Jesus. So as we think about the stories that are told and how they were interpreted at the time, then we have to think about two different audiences, and therefore two different purposes, and maybe even two different interpretations, sets of interpretations. Now, here's another question for you: to take up your cross and follow me, right? And of course, our interpretation of cross is doctrinal, right? Because we are accustomed to thinking of the cross, of the tool of execution on which Jesus died. That's what we're thinking of, right? So we're thinking you have to be willing to pick up your tool of execution and die. I did read one interpretation that said that a cross at the time was really about a rod, your
Walking
form, or
sticks.
your weapon, or your stick, not just a walking stick, but your weapon that would be,
Like a sword.
right. Well, yes, but not quite the purpose of the sword, right? And I also thought, and I haven't found an answer yet, so I cannot tell you with certainty, but I also asked myself, and here's something for you to think about. Why would Jesus use the word cross, a word that became popular after he died? Why would he use it in the early part of his ministry?
So I was thinking maybe he didn't use it.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer.
Somebody used it for him?
Right. So Luke is telling the story, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Those things are worth exploring. And then if Luke uses the term and attributes it to Jesus, what is Luke saying about what Jesus might have said, right? So those are important considerations. So Luke apparently saw Jesus as having sacrificed his life, right? Made his life sacred for others, right?
Yeah.
So Luke is essentially telling us that Jesus would want us to do the same, right? That Jesus would want us to understand that there are going to be some sacrifices, not that we should die, but that there will be some sacrifices, right?
Right.
And I won't even take us to, like 3rd century where people thought that, for sure, certainly even in the 1st century, for sure, that that they were likely to be martyred of God. But that's not what Jesus must have been talking about, right? Not the same Jesus that was telling everybody else about, how God was just going to give them a better life, right? If they just, had faith. So as scholars, it's important for us to really ask the hard questions, do the research, do the disciplined research, right? And find some new answers to those questions that arise. And then after we have considered Jesus's audience, and after we have considered Luke's audience, and after we've considered what these words meant to the audiences of that time, then we can place it into our understanding of its applicability to our time. So let's continue to see what Jesus is doing, think about how he was doing it, see what the writers were doing and how they were doing it, and then let's look at how God can help us as we continue to walk in the fullness of who God is. Thank you.
Amen.
Amen. Okay, I'm going to stop our share. Thank you once again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Pastor, for closing us out. We are now at the top of the hour, and we want to say, please, by all means, come and visit us. We do our Bible study live right here from 7:30, well, 7:40, 7:40 to 9, give or take. But if you're able to jump on at 7:30, you'll find a beautiful group of people that have smiles all on their face, just wanting to fellowship with one another and to share their hearts for the day.